Bob Subkowiak as our special guest, respiratory therapist from COPD, Breathe Strong America. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Yolanda.
We also have Cindy Marchetti, Director of Marketing from Triology, as well as Rick Verfali. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, for those of our listeners and viewers who don't know anything about Triology, would you please give them a little rundown on what Triology does?
Sure. So Triology is a Medicare certified home health agency here in Palm Beach County. We actually service pretty much all of the state of Florida, with the exception of the Panhandle and Dade County. But our office here in Palm Beach County, we basically offer all kinds of services in the home for Medicare patients, ranging from physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, respiratory, for example, all different types of services that we offer in the home through a referral basis from your physician. And if there's any questions, of course, feel free to reach out to us. But we work closely with different agencies, and Breathe Strong America is one of them. So it's different types of partnerships that we like to foster here in the county.
Mm-hmm. Right. So as Cindy mentioned, our special guest tonight is Breathe Strong America. Bob, would you please give us a little bit about Breathe Strong and what
Sure.
your purpose is?
I'd be glad to. Breathe Strong America is a nonprofit educational endeavor. It's a coalition of a partnership of patients, caregivers, and providers. It was birthed in 2017 from about 8 years actually of work that I'd done in Florida here as the Florida COPD Coalition Coordinator with the U.S. COPD Coalition and COPD Foundation. And basically it emerged as a need to help with a simple vision to connect, engage, and empower the patients with lung problems that are life-threatening, like COPD, with caregivers, those in the home who are the champions, who are really making sure that their loved ones are getting the benefit of the therapy they need, and also with the healthcare professionals. So we're all singing the same tune. So we said, in order to honor some of the champions of those groups, especially the patients and providers, we wanted to develop a guide, a patient education guide. We call it Breathe Strong Patient Guides, to help with the same common language to communicate and improve confidence in their self-management and staying out of the hospital. And not only staying out of the hospital, but having an active and happy life.
Okay, so it sounds like a very much of an educational role. Are there any other specific services you provide at Breathe Strong America?
Well, we do provide in our guide resources, references of resources for patients, and making sure that home health agencies, durable medical equipment agencies, devices to help with medications, with oxygen, with clearing their airways with COPD, to have endurance exercise tools. So we encourage more awareness of the tools to equip them. And also, one of our services we provide is to help connect and empower workshops in small groups and communities. So we want to support COPD, alpha-1, which is a genetic form of emphysema, and pulmonary fibrosis, which is another life-threatening pulmonary disease. Those type of support groups throughout the state, as well as workshops where we bring patients and providers together on a Saturday and let's talk real life.
Right, definitely. I wanted to show this guide that he was referencing. It's a very thorough guide. Definitely want to get your hands on one of these. How could they, by the way?
All they do is simply call an 877-396-8161 is a toll-free number. Or the easiest way is just to either go to my email at Bob S., which is on the back of the guideline here, Bob S. at COPD, and this is the tricky part, Breathe Strong, So there's an E at the end of that breath, okay?
Yeah.
COPD, breathestrong.org. And we'll be glad to take care of any individual. In small groups, we'll send complimentary sets of, for instance, support groups or pulmonary rehab programs. We'll be glad to provide a starter set, or for physician offices as well.
Right, right. Yeah, I think we talked to you. You also provide that to home health, like Triology. So
Definitely.
they have that. They can provide that as well.
And you'll notice the guide that you shared here has Triology right on there. We do have the ability to align with our partners who want to make sure that people are aware Triology is providing this service.
Okay. All right. Well, moving on from there, for those that don't know what COPD is and
Okay.
what are the different signs, and how can somebody find the symptoms or differentiate that between COPD and something else?
Okay. Basically, COPD stands for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and it's a group of umbrella group of diseases. In North America, the most common presentation is chronic bronchitis, where there's inflammation of the airways and extra mucus in the airways, or emphysema, where there's a destruction of the air sacs of the airways. Those are the two most common ways that it's identified, but it does include some other severe, when we say obstructive, we mean that the airflow is limited on exhalation, so that that would include chronic asthma, where the patient has difficulty and it's difficult to be managed with their asthma, bronchiectasis, which is another disease that is a chronic disease of inflammation and infection and pockets of airway. The airways become dilated, and there are actually pockets of infection that the patients need a special treatment plan with that. But it also falls into there. And then the most other common one people hear about is cystic fibrosis. It is also a chronic obstructive disease due to the excessive mucus that's being secreted throughout, and nutrition and breathing are the mainstays for that one. But basically, it's a chronic illness, but it's also affecting many more people at a younger age than it used to be. It used to be thought that I'm in the 60s and 70s before I'll have this presented. We're
Right.
seeing people in their 30s. Recently, you've heard about the vaping problems.
We were talking about that earlier.
It's a huge one that's been a silent. In fact, as healthcare professionals, I'm sure Rick can speak to this. It's one of those things where we need real talk going on, and not just let's placate the politicians and the profiteers of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, yeah, it's important that we now have more studies coming out with, making people more aware that vaping can be dangerous and leads to things like this. So, when someone asks or is seeking out services for Breathe Strong, when should they actually seek out your services?
Basically, if they're curious, give us a call, drop us an email,
That's easy
and we'll listen to their story. Because I think that's another big problem we have in our healthcare system many times is we wait for a person to have a real problem. They call it, the fancy term is an exacerbation, but really we call it a flare-up, where the symptoms are out of control. Well, let's talk about it earlier. And a lot of times it might be that caregiver, that spouse or husband or child of the parent might be the one who notices it. That mom or dad, you're not moving quite around as fast as you. It might be that lack of vitality that is the first thing noticed. So if you're suspected, but basically the classic symptoms of a more progressive stage that it's developing for the confirmation of the diagnosis would be a chronic cough, shortness of breath on exertion, and basically it's many times attributed to, well, I'm just getting older, I've put a few pounds on, but no, it's not really matching here. And we have in the guide, we have handouts to help the patient and their physician work together on those symptoms and assessing those symptoms.
Okay.
It's good to catch it early, and I think that's why these pamphlets are so beneficial to the COPD patient. whether it's moderate, severe, or they're at the onset. So education is so important. And in today's world, we're all on the internet looking up all the different things and, for our disease,
Self-diagnosing.
self-diagnosing and treatment.
Google.
And this is just a great, great brochure that identifies from A to Z in education for COPD. I just want to make a comment, if you don't mind. One of the things that I find that it's been helpful is the education process for our patients, that we have preventing them for rehospitalization. And not only that, because of the exercise program for muscle recruitment and in help endurance, it increases their ability to get to pulmonary rehab programs. So the outcomes are much better. So.
I really want to echo that, Rick. I think that's a great point, because many times your education and encouragement of that activity early on
Right.
is so important. And getting back to your question, a lot of times the criteria to enter a pulmonary rehab program might not have been met. But your point about early onset, Medicare only reimburses for moderate and severe stages of COPD. However, if it's mild, everyone for many years has said, why aren't we addressing it early?
Right.
Well, we want to encourage that. And that's why we include home exercises and how to do pulmonary rehab at home with additional help. And that's one of the other things about this guide. We're finding between home health agencies and other places in the community, we're finding ways for pulmonary rehab for life to be happening, not just in a so many hours for so many weeks in a government approved, insured approved program. Because let's face it, 2 or 3 times a week is great, but everybody needs to exercise 5 days a week. So what are you going to be doing the other days? Well, here's some tips to help you do that.
Right. Okay. So a lot of times people reach out to their local physician, their primary care physician. Do those doctors have this material? Do they know? I mean, are they aware about this material? How can they get this?
Yes and no. Basically, the ones who, it sort of gets back to one of your questions about the patients. The curious doctor. I'll give you an example. I'm coming back from a meeting in California on a flight down to Fort Myers. And I'm on the plane and getting off and have a conversation. Somehow I always talk about Breathe Strong. Okay. And on the way, on the plane, it was a young pulmonologist in Fort Myers. Now I'm following up with him. But a lot of times, the pulmonologists, the specialists, are so busy putting out the fires. There's not enough time that they have dedicated for the education side. But the primary care physician and the nurse practitioners, like we were talking about earlier, I think that earlier on, in terms of the healthcare team recognition, before it gets to the need for a specialty, the better off the outcomes will be.
Okay. On that note, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. You're listening and watching Your Hometown Health Show, and I'm Yolanda. We'll be right back after this break.
Triology was established in 2016 by industry experts with over 30 years in home health care operations spanning 30-plus counties throughout the state of Florida. With offices in Jacksonville, Port St. Lucie, West Palm Beach, we strive to provide the most optimal care to our patients in a fun, forward-thinking environment. Our focus is on personal relationships, whether with an employee, a patient, or an outside community. Because we know that when people enjoy what they do, it becomes why they do it. Call Triology today at 954-689-6660 and ask for more information. In addition to offering the standard mix of services, SN, PT, OT, speech, MSW, and HHA, we also take great pride in being on the cutting edge and offering care and education to our licensed clinicians in other areas most agencies likely don't offer. Emotional and behavioral health with our psych nursing, biofeedback for bladder incontinence and pelvic pain, chemotherapy, IV hydration, antibiotic and respiratory therapy. Call today at 954-689-6660. Triology Home Care. You have been listening to the Triology Home Health Show, and if you wish to be a guest on our show, please call us at 561-670-9213 and let us share your knowledge and information with our listeners. Triology Home Health Care Show enjoys serving the community and bringing doctors and facilities of interest to help educate and inform the community. Please call us at 561-670-9213 and let us put you on the airwaves with the Triology Home Health Show.
Hello again. You are listening to your Hometown Health Show, and I am Yolanda Santana with All Bits Tech. This show is sponsored by Triology, and our special guest tonight is Bob from Breathe Strong America. We were talking about how physicians get materials, and I think Cindy wanted to chime in on that.
Yeah, just quickly. So as Triology here in Palm Beach and also in Broward up through Vero, even on this coast, a lot of our reps are working with the local physicians to distribute the booklets to different accounts so that the physicians have access to them for their COPD patients or respiratory type population of patients. And we as a company feel the definite need for respiratory therapy. And so for any of our patients that have, any type of diagnoses where it would benefit them, we always include respiratory services, and with that comes the booklets. So we generally will disperse these booklets as well to our patients directly. But on the other side of that, we also work very closely with some of our physician offices and groups that we deal with. And so the reps will bring those directly to those accounts so that they have access to them, even if it may not be a patient of ours, one that, is a potential patient later on maybe, or one that might benefit from it. So they will work with them directly to distribute those to the local offices. But if there are any others, by all means, if they contact us directly, we're happy to go ahead and distribute those to them too.
Right.
I think that role of the home health agency and the utilization of the skill set of the respiratory therapist is really effective. And you are in a really good position in the community as a home health agency to provide that connection to the physicians and the patients. And I think this is a partnership that we're going to continue to focus on growing.
Right, yeah, for sure.
Perfect.
And Rick, did you want to, I know as a respiratory therapist, you mentioned you work with the patients as well?
I have many patients I work with the COPD. And I met Bob at one of the conferences about a year and a half ago. And when I saw his lecture, it impressed me. I said, well, this is what I'm doing now. So we need to incorporate this book with us for the patients. So what are we doing? We're doing breathing techniques and breathing exercises to help control their work of breathing, help prevent the air trapping, and also to help them with this exercise program. The exercise program is a stepping stone, and it helps them to prevent for rehospitalizations. Not only that, it helps them to get into the pulmonary rehab program. And I have seen my patients successful in getting there. So, and I
That's
thank
wonderful.
Thank Bob for all that
Well,
he's provided to us.
I want to thank you all today for your patience. I was in a meeting earlier in Miami, and one of the things you just reminded me of is I thought it was going to be one person, but it turned out to be not just a COPD educator, but pulmonary rehab, the director of the healthcare system, and their respiratory team. And we were applying the guide right there. We were actually doing the teach back, what we call teach back, where we demonstrate and have the patient demonstrate back. Because even though I'm dealing with respiratory therapists and healthcare professionals, I'm talking to respiratory therapists in the hospital. And I want them to realize the benefit and have them practice with me so that when they're there at 3 o'clock in the morning in the hospital and they have that opportunity to reinforce that to the patient, we're all on the same tune.
That's important. Definitely, you got to be unanimous, and that's why it's so wonderful that you work together with Triology. But you also do that in the hospitals, the physicians, and
well, we've got to be one team in this healthcare thing. We're healthcare, not just flare up treaters.
right. All right, so let's get down to the nitty gritty because I'm sure we have listeners that are wondering, okay, how do I pay for this? Does my insurance cover this, etc.?
I'm glad you asked that question. We just charge a minimal at our cost. We're a nonprofit. We don't have. In fact, it's interesting because I look at healthcare systems who pay for these kind of guides, patient guides. We're a lot lower cost to any large partner that's buying them, but we try to keep the cost down to a minimum and not charge patients. We provide them no charge to patients.
All right.
The guide itself
The
is
guide
not
itself,
charged,
yes.
right? So as Trilogy, obviously, if we have patients that we're taking care of, we provide them to the patient
Right.
in the same way.
Right.
And again, our services, as long as the patient has Medicare, they would be covered. It's covered at 100%. It's not a Part B. It's through the same Part A that might be covered by, say, the hospital, for example. So through us, there's no type of copay or deductible or anything. We bill just Medicare. And so it would be going to them through that same avenue, if you will.
We don't charge for the pamphlet for the
Right.
patient.
Right.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, how, if you could describe a scenario in which you would work with the patient and how you work with Trilogy
Right.
together with that patient?
Okay. I'll give you an example of the text I had today. Rick has a patient that just moved down from California, okay? And says, Bob, could you make sure that this patient receives the guides, okay? We'll give him the guides. Rick follows up, and we work as a team, That's a simple version of it, basically. But we try. That's a good point, though, because we've been pretty successful in getting the guides distributed. So Trilogy is not only on this coast, but I live on the West Coast over in Fort Myers. And I get calls every once in a while from your team over there.
Right.
Bob, can you get us some more guides until our next order comes in? And we do that. We do whatever it takes to make sure that we have the guides available, because they are become very popular and well received by the physicians and the patients.
Yeah, we find that the patients really enjoy them as well. But just to kind of clarify a little bit, so if we have a patient, for example, there's a patient, let's say, that's admitted to a hospital locally. That patient has, let's say, COPD or CHF, maybe some other comorbidities. They're being discharged back home or maybe to a SNF or wherever they might be going. So once we take that patient on, we go ahead and review the case. We then, let's say, accept the patient and get the patient started on our services. So once that happens, any type of history of COPD or CHF or, any similar respiratory related issue, one of our respiratory therapists would then be consulted on the case. They would go and visit the patient. At that point, they would go ahead and start services along with maybe therapy, either occupational therapy or physical therapy, or even just nursing for different types of issues they may have. And so we have a team then at that point that is servicing the one patient, and all of the therapists together, can help to keep that patient out of the hospital. And, even if it's some type of wound care or something in addition, all of those different things get treated all simultaneously yet at the same time. And so we really work together as a team, and each patient has, some of the best actual clinicians that they could as part of our team over here, at least, and I'm sure on the West Coast too. But whether they're a patient or not, if there is a
Right.
patient in general, we're happy to go ahead and help distribute them, like the one before.
And one of the things that I really appreciate what you said was that the importance of that handoff in the hospital and to home. And I want to thank Rick and Trilogy for our partnership early on of working. When you had that defined need, we worked on a worksheet together to help that therapist in the assessment process and making it very specific to that condition in terms of the evaluation for exercise and with the goals of not only understanding your treatment plan, but really staying active and emphasizing, because when you really look at it with COPD, medications, oxygen, pulmonary rehab are all important, but activity and moving is the key. And the more that we can help people breathe, and the more that we can help them breathe strong.
Right, exactly.
For sure. So, you're saying people should be moving 5 days a week.
Yeah, the 7 days a week, but 5 days
Yeah,
in
like-
terms of exercise. One of the things,
But
yeah,
by moving,
yeah.
is it just to the refrigerator and to the couch, or?
Well, and actually,
That's a good question.
It's a very good point. Historically, classically, there's a 4x4, and that patient has everything around them, and they don't go up past that TV. What we want to see is, hey, I'm sorry, Mrs. Jones, you don't go to get Mr. Jones' mail. He can go out and get the mail.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And we want to get that mindset in place.
And it's covered in the pamphlet. It's fantastic.
So I want to just jump in here for a second, and this walking program is not to the refrigerator and back. I have to say, it's going to be. It starts at week 1 and works down through week 6. And what we do is we start the patient out walking 4 or 5 minutes, and then a little bit of a short break, and then another 5 minutes. So they're walking 10 minutes. And then they increase the second week to 7 minutes, or a total of 14 minutes, just to give you an example of what the program is.
Definitely. You
So
want to
that's
increase.
why it makes the
stamina.
difference.
And in the guide, you'll see that there'll be pictures reinforcing the breathing. So they blow as they go.
Absolutely.
My goodness, it's gone by so quickly. Can you please tell our listeners and viewers how they can get a hold of you?
Certainly. Best way is by email, bobs@copdbreathestrong.org, or toll free 877-396-8161.
I want to thank you all for joining me today on our show, your Hometown Health Show. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Same here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
You too.
Triology Home Healthcare invites you to call our offices before making a decision about your home health and rehabilitative care. Different from other agencies, Triology offers specialized service that other agencies don't, providing exceptional care. That's who we are and what we do. Call us at 866-599-4959 or go to trilogyhomehealthcare.com. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of the station, its staff, management, or sponsors.